He didn't lose control that morning. He followed a plan. At first glance, February 19, 2020, looked ordinary. A school morning. A quiet Brisbane street. A mother preparing to drive her children where they needed to be. Hannah Clarke buckled her 3 kids into the car, just as she had done countless times before. There was no shouting. No visible struggle. No reason for anyone nearby to believe something terrible was about to happen. But what unfolded next was not sudden. It was not impulsive. And it was not caused by a moment of rage. It was the final act of a pattern that had been escalating for years. A man washing his car heard screaming and froze. A passing driver saw flames where there should have been nothing but traffic. A neighbor ran toward the smoke with a fire extinguisher, only to watch the vehicle erupt into an explosion. Witnesses would later describe the scene as chaotic and incomprehensible. A mother on fire, children trapped, a man standing disturbingly calm beside the burning car. What no one there could see was the history behind that moment. The control, the threats, the warnings that had already been raised. To understand how Hannah Clarke ended up there, we need to understand who she was and who she trusted. Hannah was born on September 8, 1988, in Brisbane, Australia. From childhood, she was known for her warmth and energy. She was the kind of person who made others feel safe. Friends described her as empathetic, optimistic, and deeply family-oriented. She was especially close to her younger brother, often acting as a protector even when she was young herself. Caring for others wasn't something Hannah learned later in life. It was part of who she was. She also excelled in athletics. By her mid-teens, she was representing her state in trampoline gymnastics. She was disciplined, focused, and well-respected. In her final year of school, she was chosen as school captain, an acknowledgement not just of leadership, but of character. After graduating, Hannah followed a path that matched her personality. She began working with children, teaching gymnastics at the Police Citizens Youth Club. She loved the work. She loved helping young people grow in confidence. It was there, at just 20 years old, that she met Rowan Baxter. Rowan was 11 years older than Hannah. He was physically imposing, confident, and quick to present himself as successful. He often introduced himself as a former professional rugby player, a title that carried weight and authority. But beneath that image was a far more troubling history. Rowan had been born in New Zealand in 1977 and raised in an unstable environment. His father spent time in prison during Rowan's childhood. Family members later described Rowan as volatile even when he was young. Some recalled cruelty. Others spoke of an ingrained resentment toward women. Before Hannah, Rowan had already been married. He wed at 18. His wife was just 16. By the time their son was 2 years old, Rowan's behavior had become controlling and frightening. When his wife tried to leave, he refused to accept it. He stalked her. He intimidated her. And at one point, he told her he had placed a hose in his car and had considered ending both his life and their child's. Terrified, she stayed longer than she wanted to. Not because she believed him, but because she feared him. When Rowan's son later attended one of Hannah's gymnastics classes, their paths crossed. Rowan pursued Hannah persistently, insisting his marriage was already over. He told her he was only staying for his child's sake. Hannah believed him. Within months, Rowan formally separated from his wife. He moved out. He presented himself as a man starting fresh. But what Hannah couldn't see, what no one warned her clearly enough about, was that this was not a new beginning. It was the continuation of a pattern. And slowly, quietly, that pattern began again. At the beginning, nothing about Rowan's behavior seemed extreme. He was attentive. He was involved. He wanted to know where Hannah was and who she was with. Not, he said, because he didn't trust her, but because he cared. To Hannah, it felt like concern. To anyone watching from the outside, it looked like intensity. And intensity, when framed as love, can be easy to excuse. Rowan liked to position himself as the protector. He was older, more experienced. He spoke confidently about life, about discipline, about how relationships were supposed to work. Hannah, still in her early 20s, trusted that guidance. What she didn't recognize at first was how quickly his opinions became rules. About 6 months into the relationship, Hannah discovered she was pregnant. The news should have been joyful. She had always wanted to be a mother. But Rowan's reaction was immediate and forceful. He told her she wasn't ready, that she was too young, that a baby would ruin everything. He pushed her to terminate the pregnancy. Hannah resisted. She wanted the child. She tried to explain how much it meant to her. Rowan responded by framing himself as the rational one, the realist, while casting Hannah as emotional and irresponsible. Eventually, the pressure wore her down. She agreed to end the pregnancy. It was a decision that haunted her, and it set a precedent. In October 2012, Hannah and Rowan married. At the time, she was already 14 weeks pregnant with their first child. This pregnancy Rowan accepted, but not without conditions. Soon after the wedding, Rowan stopped paying child support for his son from his previous marriage. When confronted, he blamed finances, then circumstances, then his ex-wife herself. Responsibility, in Rowan's world, always belonged somewhere else. On April 10, 2013, Hannah gave birth to their daughter, Aaliyah. Aaliyah was bright, expressive, and emotionally perceptive. Even as a young child, she was sensitive to tension in the home. She noticed how her father spoke to her mother, and unlike many children, she didn't stay silent about it. As time passed, Hannah became pregnant again. Their second daughter, Lionah, was born on March 19, 2015. Lionah had a gentler nature. She often tried to calm situations, stepping between her parents when Rowan grew angry. Their third child, Trey, arrived on December 4, 2016. He was deeply attached to Hannah, happiest when close to her. From the outside, the family appeared complete. But inside the home, the atmosphere was changing. Rowan's need for control became more pronounced. He insisted they share a joint Facebook account, refusing to allow Hannah one of her own. He monitored her messages. He questioned conversations. He framed surveillance as transparency. Gradually, Hannah's contact with her family was reduced. Rowan discouraged visits. He criticized her parents. He positioned himself as the only person who truly understood her. When the children misbehaved, Rowan's reactions were harsh. If toys weren't cleaned up quickly enough, he threw them away. If Hannah disagreed with him, he punished the children by canceling activities they were excited about. Control wasn't just about Hannah anymore. It extended to the kids. After arguments, Rowan would leave the house without explanation, sometimes taking the children with him. Hannah would panic, unsure when they would return or where they were going. Once, after Hannah spoke to her mother on the phone following a fight, Rowan confronted her and repeated the entire conversation back to her, word for word. When she asked how he knew, he casually admitted he had left his phone recording. A coworker later told him this was wrong. Rowan dismissed the concern. To him, boundaries were obstacles. Rowan also exerted control over Hannah's body. He demanded daily. If she refused, he provoked arguments until she was emotionally exhausted. He degraded her, insulted her, and made compliance feel like the only way to restore peace. In one violent outburst, he smashed her watch and stormed out. Terrified he might harm himself, Hannah called her mother in panic. Her parents drove through Brisbane searching for him. When Rowan finally returned, he claimed he had gone to a church parking lot and had come close to ending his life. It wasn't a confession. It was leverage. And by then, Hannah was living inside a relationship where fear, obligation, and hope were tangled together, so tightly that escape no longer felt simple. By the time Hannah began to understand what was happening to her, the ground beneath her had already shifted. The relationship no longer felt like partnership, felt like surveillance. Rowan needed to know where she was at all times. If she was late, even by minutes, he demanded explanations. If she went out, he wanted proof. If she spoke to family, he questioned every word. Over time, Hannah learned to preempt his reactions, editing her behavior, her tone, even her thoughts, just to keep the peace. This was no longer love. It was compliance. Rowan's control extended into every corner of their lives. He dictated how the children behaved, how they were disciplined, and how Hannah responded to them. If the children cried, he accused her of being weak. If they resisted him, he blamed her for turning them against him. The home was unpredictable. Moments of calm could turn hostile without warning. Rowan's anger didn't always explode. It simmered, and that made it worse. Hannah began to feel like she was walking through her own life on tiptoe. She stopped inviting friends over. She stopped sharing problems with family. Not because she didn't trust them, but because she was afraid of what Rowan would do if he found out. The emotional abuse became constant. Rowan insulted her appearance. He belittled her intelligence. He told her she was lucky he stayed. He framed his cruelty as honesty, his demands as standards. At times, he alternated between cruelty and remorse. After especially frightening episodes, he would cry. He would promise change. He would talk about his past, his pain, his trauma. Hannah wanted to believe him, but the cycle always repeated. As the years passed, Hannah began to fear not just for herself, but for her children. Rowan's behavior toward them grew more troubling. He played aggressively. He pushed boundaries. In videos he posted online, he was seen forcing the children into physically distressing situations, laughing while they cried. Hannah saw what others didn't. She saw how tense the children became when Rowan was angry. She saw how they monitored his mood the way she did. She saw how Aaliyah, even as a young child, began challenging her father when he spoke harshly to her mother. And she knew that wasn't safe. The moment that changed everything didn't come with violence. Came with clarity. Hannah realized that nothing she did would ever be enough. No level of obedience would bring peace. No amount of patience would soften Rowan's need for control. And for the first time, she allowed herself to think the unthinkable. If I stay, this will end badly. In November 2019, Hannah reached out to a family violence support service. She was careful. She believed Rowan was monitoring her communications. She spoke quietly. She asked questions rather than making statements. She admitted she was scared, but unsure how to leave without putting her children in danger. With their help, she began planning an escape. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't fast. It was cautious, deliberate, and driven by fear. In early December, Hannah put the plan into action. She picked up Aaliyah from school and didn't go home. She drove directly to her best friend's house. She left her phone in the car, convinced Rowan was tracking her location. The next day, she moved herself and the children into her parents' home. For the first time in years, Hannah felt a sense of relief. But Rowan didn't let go. He contacted family services. He contacted doctors. He contacted counselors. He presented himself as the abandoned husband, the concerned father, the man trying to get help. Behind the scenes, he began rewriting the narrative. He told people Hannah was unstable, that she was overreacting, that she was keeping the children from him without cause. And while Hannah tried to rebuild safety, Rowan began circling. Leaving didn't end the control, challenged it, and that made him dangerous. Leaving Rowan did not bring Hannah safety. It brought scrutiny. In early December 2019, Hannah went to the police. She was exhausted, shaken, and unsure of what to do next. She explained the years of control, the monitoring, the intimidation. She told them she was afraid, not just for herself, but for her children. Police advised her to apply for a domestic violence order. Hannah hesitated. She feared that formal legal action might provoke Rowan further. She worried that escalating the situation could push him towards something irreversible. Like many victims of coercive control, she was trying to manage risk, not just report harm. Still, she continued communicating with Rowan carefully, hoping to keep things calm for the sake of the children. Rowan used that access to manipulate her. He framed himself as the victim. He told Hannah she was damaging the children by leaving. He accused her of being selfish. He suggested reconciliation not because he had changed, but because he could not accept losing control. At the same time, he began contacting Hannah's parents, insisting she was mentally unstable and claiming he had done nothing wrong. He created confusion, doubt, division, and then his behavior escalated. Rowan began appearing without warning. He let himself into Hannah's parents' home. He showed up where she was shopping. He appeared at places she visited regularly, cafes, stores, familiar routes. It happened too often to be coincidence. Hannah became convinced he was tracking her. On December 26th, Rowan had the children for the day. He was supposed to return them that evening. When Hannah arrived to collect them, Rowan suddenly hurled 4-year-old Lyanna into the front seat of his car and sped away. A bystander witnessed the scene and immediately flagged down a nearby police car. Officers spoke with Hannah, but without formal custody orders in place, their powers were limited. They tried calling Rowan. They went to his home. He was nowhere to be found. Later that night, Rowan FaceTimed Hannah. He issued a demand. He told her he would not return Lyanna unless Hannah admitted to having an affair and ended it. It was a hostage situation disguised as a conversation. Terrified, Hannah contacted her lawyer. A formal letter was prepared demanding Lyanna's immediate return. Police, now increasingly alarmed, made a decision. They proceeded with a domestic violence order on Hannah's behalf, even though she had initially hesitated to file one. When officers finally located Rowan, he was just about to put Lyanna into his car. They informed him of the court-issued order. It prohibited him from coming within 300 feet of Hannah or the children until a hearing could determine permanent arrangements. Police took Lyanna into their care and returned her to Hannah. For the first time, the system had intervened. But the damage was already done. Following the abduction, Lyanna developed intense separation anxiety. She refused to let Hannah out of her sight. During a welfare check, officers noted how frightened she appeared. Hannah submitted a detailed statement outlining the abuse she had endured. She described the constant pressure, the sexual coercion, the degradation, the fear that never left. She told police that Rowan had once described, in disturbing detail, a plan to kill his ex-wife, their son, and himself. She believed deeply that he was capable of doing the same to her and the children. Despite this, Rowan continued reshaping the narrative. He contacted police claiming he was the one who felt threatened. He attended counseling sessions, presenting himself as a distressed father struggling with separation. He admitted jealousy. He admitted control issues, but no comprehensive family violence risk assessment was conducted. Coping strategies, emotional validation, not danger. On January 8, 2020, the court upheld the domestic violence order. Rowan was prohibited from committing any form of family violence, approaching Hannah's home, or contacting her except in matters related to the children. Legally, boundaries were now in place. Psychologically, Rowan had lost control, and that loss was something he could not tolerate. The court's decision was supposed to bring clarity. On January 23, 2020, custody arrangements were finalized. Hannah was granted full custody of the children. Rowan was allowed scheduled contact, alternating weekends, short weekday visits, and FaceTime calls, under specific conditions. All exchanges were to take place at Hannah's parents' home. Boundaries were written, rules were clear, but Rowan didn't see limits. He saw injustice. Almost immediately, the children began expressing fear. Aaliyah, the oldest, was the most vocal. She resisted visits. She questioned where her father was taking them. During one overnight stay, she called Hannah crying, saying they were driving somewhere, but she didn't know where. Hannah felt powerless. She was legally required to comply. She was emotionally certain something was wrong. Rowan used every moment of access as leverage. He returned the children late. He ignored agreed schedules. He withheld information. Each breach was small enough to be dismissed, but together they formed a pattern. Control was finding new ways in. On January 31st, Rowan brought Trey back later than agreed. As Hannah unbuckled her son from the car, she noticed something placed deliberately within view. Explicit photos of herself. They weren't accidental. They weren't misplaced. They were a message. Shaken, Hannah grabbed the photos and turned to leave. That's when Rowan stepped out of the car. Without warning, he twisted her wrist behind her back. Hannah screamed. Her mother ran outside and immediately called police. Rowan denied everything. A doctor later confirmed Hannah's wrist was sprained. She was fitted with a splint. The assault was reported as a breach of the domestic violence order. Police attempted to question Rowan. He refused to speak without a lawyer. Despite violating the order and physically assaulting Hannah, Rowan was not arrested. He was issued a notice to appear in court at a later date. To Hannah, it was a message. He could keep pushing. Behind the scenes, Rowan's life was unraveling. He lost his job as a personal trainer. The gym he had co-owned with Hannah had closed. And now, Hannah's lawyers notified his legal team that due to the assault, she would no longer be complying with the parenting agreement. Rowan would no longer have access to the children. This was the moment everything changed. To Rowan, this wasn't about the kids. It was about possession. He saw himself as the injured party, the betrayed one, the man whose authority had been stripped away. He refused to accept responsibility for his actions. Instead, he focused his anger on Hannah. He continued appearing near her at cafes, shops, familiar places. Encounters that happened far too often to be coincidence. Hannah became convinced he had placed a tracking device on her car. Her fear deepened. She began voicing it aloud. On the evening of February 18th, Hannah confided in her mother that she felt something terrible was coming. She told her she needed to write a will, because if Rowan killed her, he would go to prison, and someone would have to raise the children. She told a friend at the gym she believed Rowan was going to harm the kids. She wasn't speculating. She was preparing. That same day, Rowan's actions told their own story. He purchased zip ties, a jerry can, denatured alcohol. He filled the container with gasoline. And he bought sweets for the children. To anyone looking closely, the danger was no longer subtle. The warnings were no longer abstract. But the system still had not stopped him. By the evening of February 18, 2020, Hannah was no longer trying to convince herself things would improve. She was trying to stay alive. That day, Rowan's behavior had been erratic but deliberate. He contacted youth and family services asking about a men's support program. 30 minutes later, he called a men's helpline with the same inquiry. To anyone on the outside, it looked like someone seeking help. But timing matters. These calls came after he had already purchased zip ties, fuel containers, and chemicals. After he had filled a jerry can with gasoline. After he had bought sweets for the children. Help-seeking and preparation were happening side by side. That evening, Rowan had a scheduled FaceTime call with the children. When the call connected, he didn't speak. He sat there silently, crying. He didn't ask about their day. He didn't smile. He didn't reassure them. He just stared. Hannah felt a chill she couldn't explain. She ended the call and told her mother something she had never said out loud before, that she believed Rowan was going to kill her. That if he did, he would go to prison, and someone else would need to raise the children. It wasn't dramatic. It was calm. It was a conclusion. She said she believed Rowan might hurt the children. She said she felt watched, hunted. These weren't vague anxieties. They were instinct sharpened by years of control. The next morning, February 19th, began quietly. Hannah and her mother followed their usual routine. They went to the gym early. Nothing seemed unusual. No calls. No messages. No sign Rowan was nearby. Afterward, Hannah returned home briefly, then stepped out again to buy coffee for herself and her mother. When she came back, she sat on her mother's bed, sipping her drink while Sue got ready for work. The children stayed close. At 7:20 a.m., Sue kissed Hannah and the kids goodbye. It was the last time she would ever see them alive. A short while later, Hannah prepared to take Aaliyah and Lina to school. Trey was strapped into the middle seat. Lina sat behind the passenger side. Hannah buckled each child in carefully. Then she started the engine. That's when Rowan appeared. He opened the passenger door and climbed in. In his hands was a jerry can filled with gasoline. He ordered Hannah to drive. She screamed at him to get out. Panicked, she managed to drive only a short distance before stopping near a man who was washing his car. In desperation, Hannah screamed for help. "Call the police," she yelled. He's going to kill me. He's poured petrol on me. The man turned just in time to see Rowan pinning Hannah down inside the car. Rowan wasn't shouting. He wasn't frantic. Witnesses later described him as calm. Hannah fought, and for a brief moment she broke free. She stumbled out of the car. But Rowan had already ignited the fuel. Fire tore across her body. The man reacted instantly, shouting at her to roll on the ground while he grabbed a hose. He managed to extinguish the flames on Hannah and turned the water on Rowan, whose clothes had also caught fire. As soon as Hannah could speak, she cried out about her children. "My kids," she kept saying. Another passerby, Samantha, saw thick black smoke while driving and rushed toward it. She took over the hose and stayed beside Hannah, trying to comfort her while they waited for emergency services. Nearby, a neighbor named Carrie Fernandez heard Hannah's screams and ran toward the burning vehicle with a fire extinguisher. Moments later, the car erupted into a massive fireball. The heat was so intense the vehicle began rolling backward. And still, Hannah cried out for her children. What was happening inside the car would not be understood until later. And what Rowan did next would leave witnesses frozen in disbelief. The flames erupted almost instantly. The car, now fully engulfed, became a wall of heat and smoke. By the time emergency services were called, the scene was chaotic. Hannah, barely able to stand, shouted for her children. "My kids, are they okay?" Her voice was desperate, raw, unrelenting. Witnesses tried to intervene. The man who had been washing his car grabbed a hose and ran toward Hannah, instructing her to roll on the ground. He managed to extinguish some of the fire that had covered her body. But Rowan, calm and deliberate, moved through the flames. His clothing had caught fire, but he remained in control, unhurried. Another bystander, Samantha, had seen thick black smoke from the street. She rushed over, grabbed a hose, and focused on keeping Hannah safe while trying to cool the vehicle. The car was now a ticking furnace. Nearby, Carrie Fernandez, a neighbor, ran toward the car with a fire extinguisher. The heat was so intense, she had to retreat repeatedly as flames roared around the vehicle. But the children were still inside. Inside the car, Rowan's planning became horrifyingly evident. Investigators later discovered that he had placed jerry cans filled with gasoline directly in front of Aaliyah's seat. The placement ensured that the fire would spread to where she sat first. Each of the children was doused with fuel, as was Hannah. For a brief moment, it seemed Rowan might be trying to rescue them. He leaned into the car, but instead of saving them, he grabbed something else. A knife. Witnesses shouted warnings, but it was too late. Rowan then turned the knife on himself. He knelt, pressed the blade to his chest, and threw himself onto it. He died almost instantly. Hannah's children did not survive the fire. Aaliyah, only 6 years old, suffered burns over her entire body. Toxic levels of carbon monoxide in her blood revealed she was alive as the flames consumed her. Lina, 4, died from a combination of severe burns, smoke inhalation, and other injuries sustained in the blaze. Trey, the youngest, suffered the same devastating fate. The first responders who arrived were confronted with the unimaginable. Hannah, though alive, was severely burned over nearly her entire body. Every instinct she had was focused on her children. She kept asking, desperate, if someone had gotten them out. There was no answer that could lessen the horror. Paramedics worked frantically to stabilize Hannah. Her burns were critical. Her body had suffered from flames, heat, and smoke inhalation. She was transported immediately to a hospital, fighting for life with every second. But the loss was absolute. The children were gone, victims of a meticulously planned act of violence. Rowan's own death had sealed the tragedy. Even in the face of intense pain, Hannah's thoughts were only for her children. She tried to call her father, Lloyd Clarke. On the other end, he heard only silence. He assumed it might be one of the children calling, unaware that it was Hannah, attempting to reach him one final time. Minutes later, the reality set in for everyone around. The lives of Aaliyah, Lina, and Trey had ended, and Hannah, badly burned, was fighting to survive. Authorities would later describe the scene as one of meticulous horror. Rowan's actions were not the result of drugs, alcohol, or sudden mental collapse. Investigations revealed deliberate planning. The fuel, the placement of containers, the targeting of the children's seats, the weapon. Every step was intentional. Hannah's survival, and her desperate pleas for her children, highlighted the cruel precision of the crimes. Investigators also found a note on Rowan's phone. "I'm finishing your game. I don't want to play anymore. You can't mess with someone's life and expect them to take it. I have told the kids that you love them. They will miss you, I'm sure." News of the tragedy spread quickly. Across Brisbane and then throughout Australia, the story stunned the public. Headlines described the unimaginable horror. A mother and 3 children burned in a deliberate act, the father dead by suicide. Her story inspired conversations about recognizing signs of coercive control, the importance of risk assessments in domestic violence cases, and the urgency of responding decisively when warning signs appear. For those watching or listening, the case of Hannah Clarke is a stark reminder. Domestic violence is not always visible. Threats can be hidden, subtle, and psychological, yet just as deadly. Legal protections, while essential, are not infallible. Awareness, vigilance, and proactive measures can sometimes prevent the unthinkable, but the responsibility to act cannot rest solely on victims.